Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm doing a review on the Superare Supergel Pro Boxing Gloves. So stay tuned. Hey, what's up guys? Carlo here. Today I'm doing a review on the Superare Supergel Pro Boxing Gloves. I got mine in the metallic gold and black colorway. 14 ounces. It is a Velcro closure only model. You can get this anywhere between 10 to 18 ounces with a total of 3 colors to choose from. It's made of 100% top grain buffalo leather on the exterior of the glove. You do have a little bit of synthetic mesh right above the grip bar and a little bit below it as well. You do have a smooth tricot liner on the inside of the hand compartment and layered foam padding that's infused with Supergel, which is essentially a gel padding. Over the knuckles, that I say is medium to soft in firmness, and there's no actual tags on either one of these gloves on where they were manufactured, but if I were to take my best guess, it's either going to be Pakistan or India. Now, with that being said, this is going to be my second pair of the Supergel gloves I've used and now doing a review on. I did a review on these when they first were released several years ago. I think it was right after COVID. I had a white and black pair. I did an unboxing video, and then I also did a review on the gloves, and they're really nice gloves, solid gloves. And they've made some small updates to these gloves in the past couple of years. Mainly is going to be in the padding and the consistency of the padding, which is probably one of my favorite features of the glove, which we'll discuss in more detail here in a second. But to me, the padding is where I feel the biggest update has been with this glove, and is also probably the largest improvement in my opinion. Now, from a design standpoint, if I were to compare this to other 14-ounce gloves, I'd say it's about medium in sizing profile. So it's not an overly large and bulky glove, nor is it super small and compact. I say it's right there in the middle. You do have that gold metallic leather that has a little bit of a smoother finish and texture to it compared to the black leather. Now, oftentimes metallics are actually laminated, so I'm planning on doing a video on leathers, the type of leathers that are used in boxing gloves. But when it comes to metallics are actually it's basically like a little foil, and it's essentially laminated onto the leather, where the solid colored leather like this are often like drum dyed, or they're dyed another way to actually get the pigmentation and the color absorbed into the leather. So that's kind of the big difference, and that's why you'll notice that oftentimes metallics always have kind of just the same texture to it compared to other solid color leathers. Now you'll notice on this, the leather on the black leather, should I say, has a little bit more of a grainy texture, where the gold on here is a little bit more smooth. So just something I wanted to point out. On the back of the glove, you do have the Superare written vertically on the back. I'd say the metallic gold on here has a nice sheen to it. It's a very sharp looking glove. You do have the dual color thumb. So you have the black and the gold at the bottom with a black attached thumb. On the palm side, everything is black, including the piping. You do have a grip bar, which I feel could have been larger and more firm. You do have that synthetic mesh as well below and above the grip bar. You do have a 3.5 inch Velcro strap that wraps all the way around. On the back of the Velcro strap, you do have a silicone patch. So Superare Fight Goods, NYC / Los Angeles, LA. So you have that there. And you also notice that the way that this cuff sits, they have it to where it's kind of recessed below the wrist padding on the back, so that it sits flush with that padding. The back of the wrist support, you're looking at about 1 inch of firm density foam with a softer foam that butts up against your skin on the back of the wrist. So a good amount of wrist support, and you can see it's a little bit thicker on the upper portion right here, and you'd basically have 3 segments of that padding right there at the hinge of the wrist to give yourself a little bit more of a rigid feel on the back of your wrist. The inside of the wrist, you're looking at about maybe a 1/2 inch of soft density foam padding that comes up there and goes all the way, and you can see where it kind of tapers off where the stitching ends. So you do have that. Inside is a nice smooth tri-cot liner. You also have a tag on here that just says handmade. So Superare New York City, then handmade, but it doesn't actually indicate the size nor where the glove is made. Now, that's another thing I wanted to mention is neither one of these gloves have any indicator, unless I'm going blind, on what size these particular gloves are. Now, I know what size they are because I ordered them, and obviously when you order the gloves, you know what you're getting, I hope. But there's no actual tag on here, no imprint, nothing that shows what size the gloves are, which it should. To me, at least the tag should show the weight of the glove. That way, you know, if you were to use these at the gym and you're leaving at the gym, or there are gloves that, you know, multiple people at the gym are using for training, they know what size they're using. And the same thing if you were to buy these gloves maybe and give them to somebody as a gift, and you know, you didn't tell them exactly what size you purchased for them, and you gave them to them, and a couple months go by and they start sparring, but they don't know what size they have because there's no indicator on the inside of the glove. So definitely something that I feel needs to be on these gloves is some kind of tag, whether it's on the inside or the outside, to indicate what size these gloves are. And again, the only reason I know what size they are is because I'm the one who ordered them. Quality-wise, the gloves are pretty good. Overall, I'd say that the metallic leather has actually held up pretty nicely. To me, metallics, you know, if you guys have watched any of my videos, you'll know that metallics oftentimes compared to solid colors wear much quicker. And it's just the way that the metallic is laminated to the leather. You know, oftentimes when you're training, you're going to be sweating a lot. Your sweat has salt in it, moisture. So the combination of the moisture and the salt from your sweat, once it gets on that leather, if you're not taking care of the glove, and even if you do, I mean, it's going to happen eventually, but it's going to start eating away at the metallic, and you'll start seeing that metallic start to kind of rub off. And if you combine that with, you know, not maintaining them right, or if it gets really hot in your gym, like here it does, here, you know, in Phoenix, a lot of gyms get really hot during the summertime. That's going to accelerate kind of the wear and tear of the metallic. So, but these gloves have held up actually pretty nicely. I'd say the only issues I've found were there's a little bit of some inconsistencies with the leather. There's also a little bit of bubbling right here, right over my index finger. You can see kind of that foam has this little bump that popped up. Kind of similar to what I've seen with like injected molded foam, even though this is not an IMF glove. See how that little bump right there? And then the back right here underneath the first R, there's like this little like imperfection that was there when I got the gloves. Almost like this little like divot. It's like a little crater in the leather. But other than that, I mean, the quality of the leather, this buffalo leather, is really nice, high quality. Feels very thick. The stitching is done very nicely throughout the entire glove. Synthetic mesh, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I see the reason why they did it is to give you some ventilation around the finger compartment. But again, I mean, it's very minimal. So it would have been nice if they just used leather all the way through. You do have that attached thumb. You can see that looks pretty good between the thumb and the index finger. When I put the gloves on the scale, the left glove was exactly on point with weight at 14 ounces. The right glove, however, was a little bit heavier by 1/2 ounce. They're at 14.5. And interestingly enough, you can actually kind of feel the difference in weight with the right glove compared to the left. Now, the good news is that both gloves are either 14 or over. So again, I've said it before, I'd rather a glove, if it's going to be off weight, I'd rather it be heavier than lighter. But again, the right glove is 1/2 ounce heavier than the left. The glove is pretty well balanced as well, so whether I grab the bottom of the cuff or the top of the glove, you don't get much sag, if any. So in terms of distribution of weight, that feels really good as well. And both gloves you can see for yourself, quality-wise, is really solid. Inside of the wrist, no exposed foam on the inner portion of the glove. Liner is done really nicely. Stitching is done consistently. Thumb looks good. Full length Velcro strap, leather, Velcro grabs nicely. Nice and grippy. Back of the wrist support looks really good. Symmetry wise, it's put the gloves next to each other. So in terms of height, both gloves are essentially the same height and same width. So that looks good as well. I'd say that the right hand, you can't really, maybe you can't see it in the video, but this right glove has a slightly more deeper, I guess, kind of more of a pre-curved fist compared to the left glove. And it's not necessarily because the left glove has shorter foam. I just think with the way that they pushed the foam into that finger pocket, to me is what kind of gives this one a little bit more of a drop. Now, when I put my hands in there, I can't feel the difference, but visually looking at it right here, you can actually see that the right glove is a little bit more dropped down. You're looking at about maybe 2.5 inches in thickness of foam padding over the knuckle. So it's not a super thickly padded glove, nor does it need to be. Coming to the palm side, everything looks pretty symmetrical. Again, the right glove has a slightly deep, I guess you can say, more pre-curved fist, but the more I break them in, that's going to pretty much disappear because the gloves will kind of retain the shape of me using them. Thumb side looks really good as well. So in terms of symmetry, it looks good. Logo looks really good as well. Same thing with the patches. So in terms of the gloves being pretty much identical to each other, outside of the finger compartment being a little bit deeper on the right, everything else looks really good. Comfort-wise, first thing you notice is the liner feels very comfortable throughout the entire glove. So when you enter the bottom portion with your hand and you slowly push your hand up into the glove, put on the Velcro strap, you can feel that smooth tricot liner throughout, on the palm, on the back of the hand, in the finger compartment, as well as on the inner portion of the thumb. When I make a fist, I don't have to worry about the thumb being pulled down. So the attached thumb does its job by not allowing the thumb to flare out, but it doesn't pull down on the tip to where I feel like my thumb is going to jam. So in terms of the actual positioning of the thumb, it's perfect. The base of the thumb also gives me enough room, especially on my left hand. That's where I usually have the issue of the fat portion of my thumb getting kind of the circulation cut off because of that piping at the base of the thumb is usually too tight. I didn't experience that with these gloves, even with hand wraps on, so that's nice. So thumb positioning feels really good, it's really comfortable. The liner feels great throughout the entire glove. I would say that the left glove right here in the index finger has a little bit of excess, like rolled over liner, and I kind of have to use my finger to scoot it around and get it out of the way in order for my finger to drop all the way down into that finger compartment. I don't have that issue with the right glove. It's just something on the left glove. So it would have been nice if they somehow were able to kind of flatten that out and make it a little bit more seamless in at least where the index finger sits. The grip bar on here could definitely be more firm and larger, but you also do have a secondary neoprene grip bar at the base of the finger compartment that covers the stitching, and eventually will take the shape of your hand the more you use these gloves. Nice deep finger compartment, not too wide, not too narrow in terms of the width of the hand compartment. And you do have a softer foam padding that envelopes your hand on the inside. So it's not like you have this really stiff foam that's up against your skin when your hands are on the inside. There's definitely more of a softer foam padding before it gets into like the Supergel or the gel that they use. Now, gel to me is one of those types of materials that oftentimes adds weight to the glove. So as a manufacturer, you have to be mindful of the additional weight that the gel puts into the glove. So that's one thing that's something you have to be aware of in terms of making sure that the gloves are on point with weight. In terms of how broken in the gloves are, I'd say they're semi-broken in. When you first get the gloves, I'd say they're maybe about 50 to 60% broken in. They're not ultra stiff, but they're not super soft either to where you can just open and close your hands with no resistance. You still have a little bit of resistance, but I'd say a couple of rounds on the heavy bag, using these for sparring, sweating in them a little bit, putting these through the rounds, you'll definitely soften these gloves up. And once they break in nicely, then they really fit to your hand and feel very comfortable. So I'd say in terms of a broken in feel, they're right where you want them to be when you first get them. Not ultra stiff, not too soft and broken in right in the middle, but gives you enough time to really soften them up and break them in. But they're definitely one of those type of gloves that once you start using them, the more you enjoy them, in my opinion. But very comfortable overall. Nothing in terms of any red flags in terms of discomfort, anything that's causing me any kind of pain when I use a glove. So very comfortable glove. Protection and performance wise, the padding on here is what I noticed is the big difference compared to the previous gloves I had, the white and black pair of Supergels. The padding on here is definitely softer and more conforming to my hand, which I like. I feel that it's much softer, and because of that, you still get the protection of the gel padding they infused in here, which is probably sandwiched in between some open and closed cell foams. Maybe there's a little bit of latex in there to kind of surround it, and some other types of foams, but it's softer. That's one thing I do like. So in terms of feedback and pop, you get a little bit more of a visceral feel landing your punches, but the padding on here compresses nicely, especially compared to the older generation of glove to where it was much stiffer. This one definitely feels softer, and I enjoy that. You know, to me, the consistency of this glove is really good for all your training in the gym. So sparring, hitting the bag, mitt work, you get good pop. Even when you're landing power shots with these gloves, it does a really good job because of that gel padding of absorbing the shock and the momentum of the shot. So even if you do have, you know, some kind of pre-existing hand injury, or your knuckles, your wrists, I think the gel padding in here that does a really good job of, you know, essentially slowing down that momentum of the punch in terms of when you land, and absorbing that and not transferring all of that impact force through your hand into your forearm. So I definitely think they did a really good job kind of balancing out the foam a little bit, making it a little bit softer, but also retaining the properties of the gel padding to where you still get that shock absorption that you're looking for. Cost-wise, these gloves are $149, $149.99 or $149.95. So let's round up. They're about 150 bucks for these gloves. You know, I think that's a fair price, all things considered, compared to a lot of gloves now that are, you know, in that $200 and up range. You're getting a really nice quality glove throughout, you know, full genuine leather. The padding to me is really the highlight of this glove, and the comfort of the hand compartment. So, you know, for me personally, those are kind of like the two boxes I like to see checked off the most when it comes to gloves. Is comfort, one, because if they're uncomfortable, oftentimes I'll sway away from like using them unless I really try to break them in and go through that process. And then just two, the padding, right? The composition, how it feels when you're landing your punches, because boxing is all about feel. And that's what I really like about these gloves. Now, there's a couple opportunities I feel, you know, with the leather. There's a couple imperfections on the leather. The weight on the right glove being off by ½ ounce. And then kind of like that synthetic mesh, I'm not a big fan of that. But other than that, everything else about these gloves are very solid, man. A really nice glove at that price point. I do like the colors they offer. You can get them in this gold colorway. They have them in black, white. They also have a synthetic Supergel glove that has other multiple colorways, but those are a little bit different. Again, at this price point though, I think it's a very solid glove. Maybe the only other thing I would recommend is, you know, having a lace-up version. I do know that this is more intended to be an all-around training glove for you know, both beginners and more advanced users. So I can see the you know, why you would go with the Velcro strap, just because it's more convenient. But I also think a lace-up version would be great, because I know there's a lot of boxers and fighters that prefer a lace-up glove, and I think that would add a little bit more to this glove in terms of bringing more people to this glove. But other than that, overall, very solid. Happy with these gloves. We'll continue to use them in my rotation. So if you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you guys put them down below in the comments box. I'll put the link in the description box. Find these Superare Supergel Pro Boxing gloves. I'll see you guys later. Peace.